Today's episode of Off the Timeline is titled The 6-5 Vote That Changed Michigan Football Forever, a 1994 hypothetical Big Ten power struggle. In 1994, the Big Ten took a vote that passed by one vote, 6-5, and in this alternate history, that razor-thin decision didn't just settle a TV dispute. It changed the trajectory of Michigan football, reshaped the 1997 national championship, and forced the Big Ten into the BCS era years early. Because what if the split title wasn't about Nebraska at all? What if it was about power? Today, we're diving into a 1990s alternate history where Michigan doesn't posture about leaving the Big Ten, but they force it to evolve instead. And the ripple effects? Well, they're massive. Now let's set the table to this 1994 hypothetical proposal. Because to understand this alternate history, we have to rewind to 1991. Notre Dame has its NBC deal, Penn State is in the Big Ten, ESPN is expanding aggressively, and Michigan's administration commissions a revenue study in 1993. It reveals something very uncomfortable. Michigan games are drawing national numbers, but equal revenue sharing limits upside. So in spring 1994, Michigan proposes what they call the National Exposure Clause. It allows each Big Ten school one protected national non-conference window annually with partial revenue retention. Not independence, not rebellion, modernization. The conference splits. And you may be thinking to yourself that Michigan would never do anything to risk Rose Bowl access. And you're right, and they don't. This is not about ever leaving the Big Ten. It's about leverage. The vote is held, 6 in favor, 5 opposed. It passes. And Ohio State leadership is furious. And that sets the table for the political battle. From 1994 to 1996, the Big Ten enters a period with massive internal drama. Ohio State represents tradition. Michigan represents national expansion. Penn State quietly supports modernization. Notre Dame signals openness to stronger scheduling alignment if the Big Ten modernizes further. And you may be thinking to yourself that Notre Dame would never flirt with conference realignment in the 90s. But remember, in this alternate history, we're not saying they join. We're saying they signal leverage. And that's much more realistic. Now the rivalry adjusts. Michigan versus Ohio State isn't just the game, it's an ideology battle. Regional control versus national branding. And that sets the table for the 1997 title flashpoint. Michigan goes undefeated in 1997. In real life, they split the title with Nebraska. But in this alternate history, that split is viewed through a very different lens. Because after the 1994 vote, the Big Ten pushes harder for modernization. They supported BCS acceleration earlier. They negotiated differently. The narrative becomes Michigan didn't just win a title, they forced the Big Ten into the national era. And you may be thinking to yourself that this overstates Michigan's influence. But blue blood leverage works differently. When your ratings drive the conference, your voice carries weight. And now Ohio State is forced to adapt. And that sets the table for the 1998 revenge vote. The BCS launches in 1998. Revenue expands. Michigan sees opportunity. They revisit the National Exposure Clause under BCS revenue frameworks. This vote ends up passing 6-5 again. The conference officially modernizes. And you may be thinking to yourself that two razor-thin votes feel very convenient, but political votes are often razor-thin, and it makes this alternate history feel very uncomfortably real. And that sets the table for ripple effects headed into 2000. By 2000, the Big Ten is slightly more nationally flexible. Notre Dame schedules more Big Ten opponents. Penn State solidifies as a national brand. The Rose Bowl loses a bit of exclusivity earlier. No collapse, no cartoon expansion, just earlier evolution. Michigan becomes the Big Ten's modernization catalyst. Now, this alternate history is not about Michigan leaving. It's about Michigan forcing adaptation. It reframes 1997. It reframes the BCS. It reframes the rivalry. Because sometimes the biggest changes don't happen on the field, they happen in a boardroom. And sometimes the most important score is 6-5. And you may be thinking to yourself that this is just another conference politics story. But conference politics decide championship access. You may be thinking to yourself that Ohio State would never allow this. But even Ohio State can't ignore financial leverage. And you may be thinking to yourself that the Big Ten was too traditional to modernize early. Yet the BCS proves tradition eventually bends for the almighty dollar. And in this alternate history, Michigan bends it even sooner. And if you enjoyed this alternate history deep dive into the 6-5 vote that changed Michigan football, hit that like button, comment below. Do you think Michigan accelerated the national era, or would have the Big Ten have modernized anyway? And if you love exploring the hidden turning points of alternate college football history, make sure you subscribe, because sometimes the most important games aren't played on Saturdays. They're decided 6-5 in a room nobody talks about. And we're just getting started.